What I'm going to tell you is obviously too little, too late, and it's also what we all knew. But we now have actually heard from FBI Director Christopher Wray that, yeah, the investigation, so-called investigation, into allegations against now Supreme Court Justice for Life Brett Kavanaugh of sexual assault, that investigation was indeed significantly limited in scope and restricted by design, by virtue of the type of investigation it was. So this, we're going to play some video clips in a second, but this is really important to understand. The debate or the argument when the so-called investigation was going on was about whether the investigation had or hadn't been restricted as a matter of an individual investigation's sort of course. What Christopher Wray testified yesterday before the Senate when questioned by Senator Kamala Harris was that all of these types of investigations happen within the boundaries established by the White House. Like there was never, we were having a debate over, did Trump say X, Y, or Z, or was this an open investigation? But the truth is, what Christopher Wray explains is, all of these investigations are specifically limited to what the White House wants. Trump insisted, you might recall, that there were no limits, that the FBI can do whatever it wants. He tweeted, and we showed you this tweet back when it happened, and I'll show it to you again. Trump tweeted, NBC News incorrectly reported, as usual, that I was limiting the FBI investigation of Judge Kavanaugh and witnesses only to certain people. Actually, I want them to interview whoever they deem appropriate at their discretion. Please correct your reporting. This was absolutely ridiculous when he said it. We also know now that it, of course, was a lie. They in the course of that investigation, the FBI didn't even speak to Brett Kavanaugh himself, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford herself. Any investigation that doesn't speak to the principals is clearly not a full investigation.
Let alone the dozens of people who knew Brett Kavanaugh and Christine Ford at the time who wanted to speak to the FBI, but it wouldn't happen.
So here is the first part of Christopher Wray telling Kamala Harris about the investigation. Take a listen.
Was the FBI given full discretion, or was the scope of the investigation limited by the direction you received from the White House?
Well, Senator, I want to be a little bit careful about what I can talk about in this setting.
So I'm clear. I'm not asking you for the content of the investigation,
understood,
just the process.
Understood. There are MOUs and other things that go back a ways that govern this, but I think it's important. I would say this, it's important to understand that unlike most investigations, like the sort that you and I and Senator Jones have all been familiar with, traditional criminal investigations, national security investigations, a background investigation is very different. Mm-hmm. And that is done, our only authority is as requested by the adjudicating agency.
The White House
in this case is the White House.
Right. He's saying here that by definition, this type of investigation is directed and limited and sort of put in place by the White House. The FBI does what the White House requests and doesn't go beyond that. So he's framing it as this is a feature of these types of investigations, not a bug, but that's what it is. And then continuing with this questioning, take a look.
And I have a lot to cover, and so if we can be as succinct as possible, I appreciate it. And I know there are a lot of details, and I appreciate your point. So in this situation, was your direction limited in scope, or were you given full direct discretion to investigate whatever your agency thought was appropriate to figure out what happened?
I think I would say that our investigation here, our supplemental update to the previous background investigation was limited in scope, and that is consistent with the standard process for such investigations going back quite a long ways.
It was limited in scope, just like all of these types of investigations are by definition. So in fact, not only was the Kavanaugh investigation limited in scope, in this specific case, these types of investigations are at their core directed by the White House in terms of scope, limits, and borders. So did Trump lie when he said there were no limits? Probably. Unfortunately, there's not going to be any repercussion for that. I mean, I read online people saying, are we now going to investigate Trump for lying about this? Of course not. Of course not. Will there be any repercussions for Brett Kavanaugh? No, the entire thing was a joke from the get-go. And now I'm curious about Jeff Flake's role in this. Did Jeff Flake deliberately request this investigation as part of a plan, knowing that it would be a limited investigation? Or did he end up sort of being a useful idiot or a stooge, where he might have been acting in good faith when he said, we've got to delay these confirmation hearings because we need an investigation into Brett Kavanaugh? And it ended up that he was taken advantage of by Mitch McConnell, Chuck Grassley. I don't know the answer, but either way, he ended up serving the interests of Donald Trump and of the Republicans, who quite frankly never cared whether Brett Kavanaugh sexually assaulted anybody.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about that. I think Jeff Flake was just trying to play both sides, especially because he's on the way out, so he wants to look like he's above the fray. So
maybe so.
He satisfied Democrats by asking for the investigation, but ultimately he also satisfied Republicans by voting for the guy.
And in a sense, Republicans played it brilliantly. I don't know if they planned every stage of it, or if it just kind of fell into their laps in this way, but it allowed Republicans to say, look, we did an investigation. Democrats still aren't happy, but we did it, and it's time to vote on the confirmation. The saving grace, Pat, is that at least it's only, it's an appointment for life. Oh, unless you get 2/3 of the Senate and a majority of the House to say remove Kavanaugh, he's in for life or for as long as he wants. 51 votes required to confirm him for life, but you need 67 votes if you want to remove him, even in light of grossly inappropriate circumstances that come to light. It's a total whitewash cover-up, which we knew. Now we just know for sure. Before, we started by suspecting it was a whitewash cover-up. Then we had almost total certainty that it was a whitewash cover-up. Now we just know for sure, which I guess is nice.
Yeah, and could Democrats have played it any better? I'm not totally sure because they don't have the majority,
Agreed.
Right? At least they got that 1 week investigation, but
they could have
it was
done
a faulty
what
investigation.
Nathan J. Robinson said yesterday, which is just focus on the perjury from day one. Focus on the perjury as opposed to an investigation that we all kind of knew wasn't really going to go anywhere. Absolutely disgusting. Not every online streaming service is the same, and today's sponsor, Tidal, is not only different from others in that they care about the relationships between artists and fans, and they value diversity in music. They offer unlimited music and video, completely ad-free. You can find music that you haven't heard. You can hear the classics that you've liked for a long time. But above all else, they're doing a benefit concert on October 23rd. It's their 4th annual benefit concert called Title X Brooklyn. And it's about criminal justice reform. It's about reforming a system where more than 2/3 of prisoners serving life without parole for non-violent offenses are African American. It's about reforming a system where 1 in 15 African American men is incarcerated compared to 1 in 106 white men. There are really important organizations working on this issue: the Equal Justice Initiative, Reform, the Innocence Project, Cut 50, and the net proceeds from Title X Brooklyn all go to supporting those nonprofits. The concerts in the past have featured artists like Stevie Wonder, Nicki Minaj, Jay-Z, Jennifer Lopez. Do not miss the free live stream of Title X Brooklyn on October 23rd. Tune in, donate to the cause at tidal.com/Brooklyn. That is TIDAL.com/Brooklyn.